We have slides.
Slides?
Yeah. You just so we have slides. We have slides.
I was just saying to like Gavin, see everything or see like it's not
Okay, so
2 weeks.
welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you here tonight. And today we're pleased to introduce Corbin Pon. And we're discussing how to start your own blockchain startup. So whether you're in kind of idea phase or you've actually got things running along so far, this is for like everyone. And yeah, let's just get started. So would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit of what you do?
Cool. Yeah, I'm Corbin. I am co-founder of Thesis, which is a blockchain venture studio, and COO at Upshot, which is an NFT pricing protocol, basically. So I've been in the space for 9 years, more than that, a little bit more than that. Started in 2013. Been doing startups in general since 2012, 2011. Yeah. So graduated from Georgia Tech, computer science degree. So I was a coder for a while, but now I'm just sort of a weird management person. So yeah, that's basically my background. I don't know. That's about it.
Yeah, so we have some questions lined up. I guess we could just jump in.
Sure.
All right, so I guess what we'll start with is what got you into the whole space and what was your path to getting there?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I was aware of Bitcoin. I mean, I read the white paper, I think when I was like college, maybe like last year of college. I thought it was kind of silly. I thought it was a bunch of like tech nerds trying to do something that like economists and like people with more serious finance degrees should be handling. So I kind of dismissed it for a few years. But my co-founder, Matt Luongo, who I'd done a couple other companies with, started Fold, which is the first company we started. And he was basically trading gift cards for Bitcoin and vice versa. And that took off. He did like $5,000 of business in the first 2 days that he was open. So he called me up. It's like, I need help again. So that really introduced me into the world of Bitcoin. I reread things. I started getting a little more sympathetic about it. And yeah, I really loved the kind of ethos about sort of individual empowerment, financial empowerment, and just sort of rewriting the rules of how to transmit value across the internet. So that's kind of how I got started. Yep.
Awesome. Do you think that there was a time when you were more startup focused, or like were you always startup focused, or did you have a more like kind of professional, like traditional setting kind of like in place before? Because I think a lot of people here sometimes like they have a startup idea, but they also want to come up in like a traditional space. And so the question, I guess, is did you always have that independent kind of point of view when it came to this?
I mean, I always had it, but I didn't start off in startups. I started out working at Lockheed Martin. So I graduated during the recession. So just kind of happy to have a job in general. But yeah, after about a year and a half at Lockheed, I got really, demoralized and bored and kind of unhappy about it. So I left. I was talking to Matt about just startup ideas. I was reading like Holograms, YC essays when I should have been actually working at Lockheed. So, I mean, I had the itch. So once that sort of, I don't know, phase of my life at Lockheed sort of ended, yeah, we jumped into starting our first company, not in blockchain space, in the kind of NLP, machine learning, kind of analysis of data space, but that was our first kind of jump into the deep end.
Nice. Would you say that during that experience, you found a set of solid steps to starting a startup, or was it different each time?
I mean, it's different each time, but like we were more experienced the second time around, so it's different that way. But I mean, in terms of solid playbook, I don't know. There's very different playbooks for very different people. What are your skills coming into it? Do you know tech? Do you not know tech? What's the industry you're really caring about? Sometimes you can do something with just purely an idea, no business model. A lot of crypto is still kind of that. It's a lot of deep tech, experimental tech kind of stuff without solid business models around it. So, I mean, it depends where you're going at the problem. So, I mean, we came at it as both computer science majors, so we could code. That wasn't a problem for us, but things like marketing and sales and design and legal and just all the other stuff we didn't know, and we had some really crappy designs and other things in the early days. So it's about knowing what your skills are and knowing where you want to go and knowing where your holes are. I think that's probably the most universal advice I can give.
And you said you started off with like NLP and not in the blockchain. So what would you say differentiates something from actually needing to be built on the blockchain, or someone like putting it out just for the sake of using blockchain and like the startup name? And would you say that someone can also bring a pre-existing business into the blockchain, or is there certain things that should just be differentiated?
Sure. I mean, all the blockchain really is a way to transmit and communicate value and ownership, around the internet, right? So that's all it really is like a tool. How that can apply to different businesses can be numerous. Like there's all the finance stuff and fintech. So basically, it's all just kind of rewriting all the stuff that currently exists in Wall Street and doing it on the blockchain. But there's other stuff like you can do attestation and like signature kind of stuff, so you can make sure that people are signing things and they're accurate. And then you can probably sometimes recreate currencies or other assets that are a little harder to sort of create or manage in the real world. So NFTs, digital art, that kind of thing. It's a little harder to manage that in the sort of regular finance world. So that's kind of what, crypto allows you to do. And I would encourage people to kind of like, take old ideas, but think of new ideas, think of new paradigms that this sort of technology allows us to do. We don't have to like ask someone to like, sign up for a Fidelity account before they can trade, stuff like that. They can just get online and create their own wallet and they can start right away. So there's those differences in terms of different paradigms. What was the first part of the question?
It's basically, is there a way for people to measure if their business should be built on the blockchain, or if they're kind of doing it for the sake of having it on there, when it could be a more like, traditional idea?
Yeah, I mean, my general rule of thumb is like, are you working in like a really antagonistic space? So finance is very antagonistic. Everyone's trying to undercut each other. Everyone's trying to do all that kind of stuff all the time. It's not zero sum, but it feels very zero sum all the time. That's a great place for blockchain because it's this sort of trustless thing where everyone needs to both agree on the state of things, but also they'll compete at the same time. That's a hard sort of balance to make. So like things like that, data silos, data warehousing, identity, those kinds of things are very sort of aggressive and antagonistic. But if it's like a simple sort of just like, I don't know, I'm selling something to someone, I'm making something and selling something, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the blockchain right now is sort of being integrated around payments for that kind of stuff, but that doesn't make the business a core blockchain business. If that makes any sense.
And like after a few of our events, we've had people ask people from different majors if they can bring in their interdisciplinary interests into this space. So do you see a lot of collaboration happening between different fields like healthcare, like any like finance, like everything coming together, or do you think it's more separate?
I mean, crypto is still trying to find product market fit, like where it actually provides value to like the general public. That's really existing right now in finance more than anything else in DeFi. But yeah, I mean, interdisciplinary stuff is more along the lines of like in crypto, you touch technology, cryptography, you touch legal, you touch money and finance, you touch user experience and that kind of stuff. So that's where interdisciplinary stuff comes involved. There's some great people who want to do stuff in the healthcare space, but the healthcare space has a bunch of other challenges outside of just trying to implement a blockchain style solution in that space. So yeah, everyone who's coming with finance background, legal background, technology background, like policy backgrounds, and sort of distributing assets and managing governance. That's all very, very needed in the space right now. Other expertises probably will come in time.
You have advice for students who may not come from like a developer or programming background who are still looking to found a startup in the crypto space? Find
a tech co-founder. That's the biggest advantage that's the biggest disadvantage that every non-technical team, friends of mine, people I've just met have. When you start outsourcing your tech early on, it's really expensive because you can't move quickly, you can't pivot quickly. Every little decision you make costs money. If you have a tech co-founder or a few of them, we're all working for nothing in the beginning. We're all on the same page. We're all willing to throw ideas out and build new ones from scratch. That sort of flexibility doesn't exist. You're contracting it all the time, and I've seen plenty of companies, torpedo themselves because of that.
Do you think that there's a way for people to protect themselves in the early stages when they're finding a tech co-founder, in terms of not getting their ideas stolen or?
I wouldn't worry about your ideas being stolen unless you're in biotech or something like that. It doesn't really matter. There's a million ideas out there. Someone's probably had your idea. I'm sure someone has our idea already. That's not the problem. The problem is execution. It's really, really hard to bring it to market and actually do what you say you're going to do. So ideas are really a dime a dozen, unless it's a very, very, very IP heavy area, like biotech or that kind of thing. I wouldn't worry. Any sort of web app, any sort of like DeFi thing, everyone's probably had that idea before. I just dismissed it. No one's going to care about your idea as much as you. So that's kind of your advantage compared to anyone else.
Would you say that there's a few solid steps of execution that you could share, that people should kind of checkpoint?
I mean, it depends what kind of
something out there.
It depends what kind of startup you're making. Like if you're doing something that needs to sell right away, you're building a widget and or an app and you get downloads or whatever, then yeah, you have a certain path of doing things. We started a lot of our stuff via like deep tech and research and whatnot. So we were building tools and architecture and infrastructure that we hoped in a few years would actually be adopted and used by people. Like we started Keep Network, which is the second company we started, and it's a privacy protocol on Ethereum. We started that 3 years before we actually launched it. I think we started like late 2017. We didn't launch it until early 2021. So I mean that path of just hiring people, building things, testing them out, making sure that our assumptions are working, finding investment partners, all that kind of stuff. It's a very different path than someone who's building a web app or building a mobile app and they're just trying to sell it. So it's very different depending on what area you're trying to focus on.
You have recommendations for people who are like in school right now looking to build a team? What are some good resources or places that they can look for people to collab with?
I mean, around you, just the people that are around you. I mean, the amount of sort of trust and relationship building that you guys have here or any sort of organization you're part of is going to be a lot stronger and better than any sort of like co-founder speed dating or like come to this meetup event or that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, outside of that, AngelList is a pretty good resource if you're early on, if you're starting out, to find like someone else who's also interested in that kind of space. Yeah, just local meetups. Yeah, local tech meetups. I mean, in Boston is a really big Python community. There used to be a big Ruby community. I don't know if it is anymore, but yeah, I mean, those are places where you're going to find tech co-founder. Yeah.
Cool. Just curious, what language would you say, or like languages would you say were most used in building the projects and like the companies that you were co-founding?
I mean, our basic language that we use is Python, variations of Python, stuff like that. But like once you got the crypto, for instance, Keep Network is built on Go. It's a networking infrastructure kind of product. Rust is really popular right now. So a lot of functional languages are really popular right now and really useful for building sort of infrastructure in crypto. I mean, right now Solidity is the de facto, crypto DeFi sort of language. It's something worth learning. I mean, it's worth learning if you want to build stuff because you have to, but it's not the best language in the world. It is pretty janky, and I hope eventually gets replaced at some point in time. But yeah, if you're going to build something, you got to learn Solidity.
And what would you say, I guess when you were working on the startups, was there competition who was like doing things in the exact or similar areas that you kind of had to find a way to like compete against, or did you say it was pretty?
Oh no, I mean, it was both very collaborative and very like competitive in the early days. So we were part of the Boost VC Accelerator, which was it does like sci-fi kind of tech. So it's on like crypto and like flying machines and like VR, AR, that kind of stuff. So when we were there, it was all crypto companies for the entire class. So there's like 12, 13 teams, all crypto. And there were like 3 exchanges. There was like 2 infrastructure companies. There was like 2 payments companies, right? So everyone was both in very similar industries, but also competing at the same time. So yeah, there was always competition. And I don't know, like one of the early companies we competed with was called, and I don't remember what they called it anymore, but they used to do Amazon for Bitcoin kind of stuff, the way we did, Bitcoin rewards. So they were a big competitor. We actually got an offer to be bought out by them at one point in time, and we turned it down because they're really, really not good at like closing deals. But yeah, the competition's always there. It's part of the landscape. It's more about who you can trust, who do you have an ability to share ideas with, to just shoot the shit with. That's really, really important, because starting a company is really lonely. Even if you have a co-founder or co-founders, your friends don't really understand what the hell you're doing. Your parents don't understand what the hell you're doing. Yeah, no one really understands what you're doing. No one understands the problems you're going to encounter. So yeah, it is good to have that sort of companionship or trust with other people in the industry that you can just shoot the shit with.
And would you recommend any particular accelerators or funds for students who are looking to gain more resources in order to actually do what they want to do and the vision that they have?
No, I wouldn't advise on any specific fund or accelerator. I always found accelerators really valuable if you know exactly what you need and they're delivering exactly that. So for Boost, we were coming from the East Coast. Our network was more out here than it was on the West Coast. They are based in the Bay Area. So we moved out there knowing that we needed to have a stronger crypto network. We just didn't have it, and we weren't going to have it on the East Coast, because other than New York, back then, only SF was the only sort of major place for anything crypto. So yeah, and we were really happy with that because we got what exactly we wanted. There are a lot of other companies in our same class that were hoping that Boost was sort of be an easy next fundraising check, and it wasn't that, because it's just really hard to raise money all the time. And back then, crypto was like not super cool. So that was really challenging. So a lot of people were really disappointed by the fact that it was a lot harder to raise money than they thought it was going to be. So that's kind of something to look out for. But like Techstars is really good if you want to like learn how to be an entrepreneur, pitch, and that kind of stuff. They put you through a lot of classes and training, and really, really gets you to hone your message, hone your skills, really, push yourself for about 12 weeks. So that's good if you need that sort of, learning system. And YC is great because it's just automatic money. You're just going to get the validation check that you're a YC company, and you can easily raise like $3 million without breaking a sweat. But of course, there's all politics and weird stuff that goes into YC. So, it's a crapshoot. Depends what you really need and want, more than this accelerator is the best one.
Mm-hmm. And on the topic of skills, what skills would you say that you really were able to build depth in or grow during the whole startup process? Or what skills were most valuable to you in that time?
The most valuable one is telling a story. As simple and silly as it sounds, being able to communicate quickly and clearly and with enthusiasm about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and getting someone else to care, or at least give you, their attention for a little bit, is huge. It's really hard, especially coming as an engineer, being not super great at explaining like what we're doing and why it matters. Kind of brought the arrogance of engineers. We're like, this is great. Why don't you get it? Obviously, we're smarter than you. Why don't you get it? But that doesn't help anyone. So being able to tell a story is perhaps the most important thing for being a founder. Other skills, there isn't any one other skill. It's basically just being able to jump in to anything and everything and learn it, or at least divvy up the work towards someone who will learn it, because you're going to get random stuff that comes all the time. Legal troubles, or like some partner will come on the woodwork and you don't know how to sketch, craft an agreement with them, or maybe you build your app and people are using not the feature you thought they were going to use. So how do you switch focuses and pivot? So it's a lot about flexibility and being sort of a master generalist, especially early on.
I wanted to open this up if anyone had questions as well.
Yeah, let's do it.
Allison.
just have a quick question on like how you secure like funding to when you're like first starting out multiple of your startups, and also how do you go about like finding the right people to join your team, and then making sure that you have like the right like team dynamics and culture in all the startups that you've done.
I mean, it's a lot of trial and error. But I mean, most of the early employees we had were friends, people from school, friends of friends in different networks, programmers, designers. Yeah, mostly programmers and designers, a few sales marketing people, but just friends, people we knew, or people we did stuff with in other, classes or organizations or anything like that. In terms of securing funding, it kind of depends where you are and what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're a company that doesn't really need funding, like if you feel like you can probably sell, your app really, really early, you might not need funding until you're ready to scale. So you might be able to, get quote unquote ramen profitable, as they say, be able to live off your revenue for a little bit as you kind of figure out where the market's going and what exactly you want to like force all your money into building. But yeah, if you're kind of doing what we did in terms of like deep tech where there isn't really a business model straight out the gate, you basically just need to find the allies, the people, the investors, mostly angels, but smaller funds that care. One of the harder lessons we learned early on was it wasn't worth our time to convince someone that blockchain was a good idea. So if they needed to be convinced of that very core fundamental belief, they were just off our list because it wasn't worth our time to both convince them that blockchain is an idea, then convince them that our company is the right company, and then convince them that we're the right people to run the company. So we want to cut out the non-believers. That was really important. So yeah, once you kind of identified who the actual believers are, the goal is to kind of figure out both how to tell the story that you're trying to tell, well, figure out how to get in front of them, because it's a lot of just warm intros, showing up, networking, and building trust. I mean, the crypto and VC world is very sort of insider kind of stuff, and it's lots of just people who know each other. All the funds talk to one another. So, it's a big sort of rumor mill all the time. So yeah, once you kind of build trust and friendship with, or at least just relationship with different investors, that's a great way in. Unless you just have like a really awesome product and a really amazing team and you're just like, we're great, like MIT, PhD, and Harvard MBA, people just give you money. Whether they should or not, I don't know, but people will just give you money at that point, so.
Did you take any particular steps to find those believers? Like, did you do a lot of research on your target market at first, or did you kind of build the ideas first, then go look for who would be open or like looking for that kind of like idea, I guess?
I mean, we built the idea first, whether in the company, the product first. I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing you should do. But yeah, one of the ways we solved sort of weaknesses was to move out to California, to move into the Boost VC network, and to basically get closer to the people who actually cared. So that helped sort of validate and verify this is a network of people who actually give a shit about crypto, and that made our job a lot easier in terms of vetting people and figuring out who's worth talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the biggest obstacles that you faced, and were there any times where you thought, I'm done, or like, this is failing?
Yeah, I mean, you're always sort of failing until you're not. So it's not about like dealing with the feeling of failure. It's just, you're always doing that. So the question is, how do you keep going when things are tough? One of the things I got lucky in my co-founder, but I advise other people to have co-founders or look for early employees or co-founders, is they got to be able to be okay and culturally fit with doing the hard stuff. When stuff's not working, when you guys are in the red for like 2 months straight, when the product hasn't launched on time, when the investors are getting snippy, like you need to have someone who's going to stick by you and you stick by them while you kind of work through the hard things. In terms of the hardest things we've ever encountered, I mean, the hardest thing for anyone is just finding product market fit. Like, does your product do anything anyone cares about that they're willing to pay for? Like, that's the hardest thing to find. If you can find that, awesome. At that point, when you find product market fit, that's when you get like a Series A and you just plunge money into marketing so that you can sell more and more widgets. But yeah, early on, that's really hard. In crypto specifically, the legal shit is really, really difficult because it's just very gray. And in the early days, we were definitely concerned about going to jail. We were concerned about violating money transmitter laws, racketeering laws, basically a lot of like mob laws that basically prevent money laundering and other kinds of things like that, which gets you criminal charges. So it's not like a penalty or a money penalty. They will throw you in jail. So that was definitely a concern for probably until 2017. Now it's a lot more, not clear, but there's a lot more understanding that no one's going to go to jail for the most part unless you're a real big scammer or fraudster. So that's helpful. But yeah, that was a really big scare concern in the early days.
I'd love to hear your perspective on maybe just like pros and cons of raising through like traditional equity model versus say through like a token offering.
Sure. I mean, token offering is basically just crowdsourcing. It's great because you get people who are hopefully invested, care, passionate about what you're doing. You get a wide audience, hopefully, of a lot of people who are giving a little bit of money. So, you know, you have this wide breadth. The problem with that is a mob isn't necessarily helpful all the time, especially when you're trying to make really hard strategic decisions about your industry. Mob can also be kind of noisy because you have to you can't really ignore them. You don't have to like cater to them, but you can't ignore them. So if you take a bunch of people's money and you sort of ignore them, they get angry. They want to be treated well and fairly. So that's a huge sort of like administrative cost in my view for having that sort of token crowdsource model. The other big advantage, right, is in the token model, people have actual ownership, like that they can execute like for governance votes and DAOs or whatnot. So that's a huge sort of difference that you don't get in sort of a traditional VC model. That being said, on the VC model side or the fund model side, getting just a couple checks that fill your round is awesome because then you have just a couple people to keep happy. Generally, some of the better VCs are really strong strategic partners, so they'll bring you, talents for recruiting or advice around how you're structuring your business. Or we actually even got code review and architecture, an algorithm help from a few firms. Like Paradigm is really great at doing that. It's a very sort of crypto specific, nice to have, but yeah, that happens as well. So that's really something you don't necessarily get in a token based model. And also, as insidery as the crypto world and the VC world is, it opens a lot of doors. If you get the right funds or the right person who's backing you, it opens a ton of doors that you would not get from a more crowdsourced model.
My question kind of goes following that one. So let's say you are a normal startup and you raise through, seed, pre-seed, and then Series A, whatever. You sell shares or you do like a safe, so your company has a valuation that could be like the market cap of your company. But if in the meantime, well, there's also like companies that do both. Like in the meantime, you're also offering a token, and that token has its own market cap, but it's liquid, so people can trade it all the time, and the market cap changes. How does that work? Like, how does how does the market cap of like your pre-seed go like in contrast with the market cap of your token?
I mean, I don't think it does work. I think what's happening right now is that people are really wanting a token. The problem is legally, it's sort of hard to pre-sell a token. So what people are doing is pre-selling equity. It's a very well understood model, startup financing. And then from there, once they have the equity, they're giving some sort of ratio of that equity in tokens. That's like really what's happening under the covers. I know there are some people trying to figure out, what's the sort of value balance between equity and tokens in a company. But I don't think there's anything clear at the moment. There's definitely people who are like kind of concerned about, not getting one or the other for various reasons that they want. The other thing about equity is that it gives you corporate voting rights. So yeah, we're decentralizing things, and there's people around the world doing stuff, yada yada yada. The core company, for the most part, is the one building all the shit. So having some sort of control and voting power in that early on, I think a lot of VCs like that. But there's an understanding that as sort of protocols and these companies grow, that equity may have less of an impact as it sort of decentralizes the governance around something. Like for instance, we recently Keep Network merged with Decipher to create Threshold Network, and basically the control of those assets are moving into a DAO. So that's sort of what everyone's going to be voting on and controlling Threshold Network going forward. Our investors got tokens as part of their deal, but no one who got equity is getting tokens. So that sort of trade-off balance.
Another question. So you like briefly mentioned like business models, and I'm just wondering if there's any like crypto-centric, like crypto-native business models that are really like that you're looking at, and if there's going to be like any emerging like status quo ones that you see becoming standardized.
Yeah, I mean, we used to joke that the only real business models in crypto were selling mining and being an exchange and getting fees from that. And that's not necessarily wrong still. Like most of the big DeFi protocols that are killing it, you know, they're harvesting fees. That's really what they do more than anything else. In terms of new business models or other business models being applied to the crypto space, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that really strikes me as novel yet. I mean, people are trying to do sort of advertising with like the basic attention token and Brave, but that's not really taking off at all. Yeah, I mean, NFTs it's just e-commerce sales at that point. So that's pretty straightforward. Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're still in the phase where we're trying to figure out what business models natively work best in crypto. And I don't think we figured it out yet. But yeah, it's trading fees and selling equipment. That's generally the two business models that have been working so far.
Yeah. What are you working on right now? Like, what has your main focus?
So I'm working at this company called Upshot. We are an NFT appraisal protocol. So I am the COO there. So I do all this sort of administrative, strategic crap, basically. Everything that isn't sort of code or design, I do that. Yeah, so we're working on trying to be able to price NFTs in a decentralized way because they don't move very much. So it's hard to figure out what the market price is at any one point in time. So we built a whole sort of appraisal network that allows people to submit submit like prices that they think that NFT should be worth, and then we reward them based on how close to consensus those estimates are. So if you throw like a dumb answer at it, like $1 billion trillion dollars, or you throw something like 0, we'll just say like, no, we'll just throw the data out because it doesn't move towards the consensus point. So that's kind of what we're working on right now, and yeah, we're hoping to launch that next couple weeks. But you guys all have beta access right now.
For someone well-versed in computer science, but not necessarily Web3, what would you say is the best way to transition to that space?
That's a good question, because like, this is like such, like I did that when there wasn't Web3. So I don't know like the resources that are currently available. I mean, I think it would be the normal thing of just trying to find either a project, open source project to contribute to, or, you know, messing around with sort of like, I don't know, something you can easily whip up, like a trading bot, or, you know, maybe very carefully implement your own sort of personal wallet or something like that. So those types of projects I think are good to start with. Yeah, someone was telling me the other day that the biggest problem with Web 2 to Web 3 developers is that they, crap, what was it? I think it's because they don't quite understand that, like, they don't quite understand selling like a digital asset, what that means and what it means to own a digital asset. That your token is your product as much as your product is your product, right? And those are hard concepts to, you know, wrap your head around. Also, just the state nature of networks in general is something that, you know, a basic Web 2 developer doesn't really know much about unless they've studied networking. And finance. I mean, all this stuff is about econ and finance and figuring out how to understand how humans make decisions and incentivize behaviors. That's something that isn't as explicit in the Web 2 world as it is a core fundamental part of the Web 3 world.
So you kind of touched on trying to encourage us to think of something new and like original, I guess. How would you ideate like a new idea? Like if we had to come out of this room right now with something that we believe is new or original, like what would be the steps you take to find something to build? Or do you believe it's just a matter of keeping your eyes open?
I mean, the easiest, most effective thing I've ever seen is solve problems that you have yourself. If you have a problem and your friends have problems, solve that problems. And if you can get people to care about it and maybe eventually pay for it, that's a great way to start. That's like the easiest thing because you're basically trying to find product market fit. And if you already have a problem, there's already a market. Now you need a product that goes along with it. So that's like the easiest way of doing it. There's other ways of doing it in terms of like being really, really, really into the industry. So like that's what we did with Keep is like we knew there was a hole between transferring Bitcoin to Ethereum and vice versa in a decentralized way. So we only knew that because we were like part of the community for so long and understand the capabilities and lack thereof of Bitcoin versus Ethereum. So because of that, we saw the hole and we could, build it. But that requires a different sort of exposure than, it wasn't necessarily our problem per se. Like we had that problem, sure, but it was more of a hole in the industry that we felt like we could solve.
Yeah, I have one question and then I have a question from the chat. My question is when you're starting a business or a startup with your friends and they're not doing work, how do you usually solve that problem? Are you a keep those two worlds separate kind of guy, or have you like had some friends that you made businesses with and then they became your friends? Or actually, no, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, how do you deal with like finding people and then like using your friends, and then do you even recommend like using friends as work colleagues?
Yeah, so this is like kind of do what I say, not what I do. I got very lucky working with friends. My co-founder Matt was someone from college. We went to computer science class together. A bunch of other friends from college that we felt were good sort of partners. Luckily worked out. There's been ups and downs and all that kind of stuff, but yeah, we were very fortunate. So I'm generally in the camp of don't work with your friends, don't work with your family. I like to say it's basically because you come into a relationship with your friend already having a pre-existing relationship, right? You have expectations of each other and understand what the other person can deliver and give back and what you give to them. When you start a business, it's a whole different thing. Now there's a different set of priorities, requirements, responsibilities, and you've probably never had those qualities in your friendships or your relationships before. And it's hard to keep someone sort of accountable, especially if that is a new component of your relationship with them. And I've seen it destroy plenty of relationships and plenty of starting co-founding teams and whatnot because they just didn't know how to work with each other. And that's very different than hanging out with each other. Even in like school projects, it's very different because there's an end time to that. So you can kind of write it out or whatnot. There's no writing it out in startup. If it's not working, it's not working. And you either need to figure it out or you guys need to split up. And generally split up is, I found, the better sort of answer.
And the second question from the chat, Jack Hughes asked, why do you think blockchain or crypto companies are branding themselves in Web3?
I don't know. I think the Web3 term just sort of caught on as a more friendly way of saying crypto. It also, bounces off of Web 1, Web 2.0, that kind of thing. Even though it doesn't make sense as a graduation of Web 2.0, it doesn't really make any sense. But that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I think it's basically just a very sort of friendly, safe word to say crypto. Because back in the day, crypto was a bad word. Bitcoin was a bad word. I remember when people said like it's blockchain, not crypto, or blockchain, not Bitcoin, and that doesn't make any sense at all. That you can have the technology without the sort of fundamental economic aspects of the blockchain. So yeah, I generally think Web3 is just a kind, safe, friendly term more than anything else. Marketing term.
Yeah, two questions. One, like, what do you think are some of the biggest changes between like when you first started in the industry and then like what it's like today? And then also more of like a joke, but like, how do you feel about like when you look across the crypto landscape and you see like projects like Pixelmon that are raising like $70 million in an NFT drop and they're like, you know, and they're like not really doing anything. And then I'm sure like when you were launching Fold, it was, you know, like nobody was getting like $70 million. So like, yeah, just kind of like, yeah, one, like, what are the changes? And the two, like, how does like all the wealth being thrown around make you feel?
I mean, the biggest change fundamentally is Ethereum didn't exist when I started. Like they had just sort of released the Ethereum white paper and people were sort of talking about it. But yeah, we started about a year before the Ethereum ICO happened. So there just wasn't a sort of blockchain computer. It just wasn't a thing. I mean, like Bitcoin has like this script language, but it's garbage. No one actually uses it because it actually doesn't do anything. So that's a humongous difference and change from when we started, because now you can actually build things that do things on their own, which is gigantic. I think also no one really knew what was going to resonate with folks in the early days. Everyone thought, you know, it's going to be like self-sovereignty, control over money and, you know, value, and you can get rid of all the banks because we're going to have the bank in your wallet and stuff like that. And we might still have that, but I mean, what's turned out to be the thing people really want is to trade things, to trade assets, to do sort of nuanced, novel financial things online. It's that, or it's the store of value of Bitcoin. Those are the two things that people really, really care about. And we didn't know that. We were still discovering all of that back in the early days. So yeah, that's kind of what's fundamentally changed. And there's just a lot more people now. Like I can't keep up with what's happening in crypto. Like I used to be able to keep up what's happening in Bitcoin when it was just only Bitcoin and maybe like Ethereum. There's like the only two real chains that anyone cared about. Now it's just absolutely impossible. Only way I keep up with anything is I have friends in different sort of subsectors. Like I have friends who run DAOs, and I have friends who are traders, and I have friends who do, you know, hardcore infrastructure stuff. And that's the only way I keep track of anything, because it's just gigantic now. And yeah, and to answer your question about the money, I don't know, man. It's not my money. I'm not investing in these things. So if people think it's going to bring value, if people think it's a good use of their money, fine, I guess. I am concerned that people are spending money they can't afford, but right now it looks like it's mostly upper middle class to rich people. So I'm not too worried about them losing their money. But yeah, I mean, it's more than a little nuts right now. But since 2017, it's been more than a little nuts. Yeah.
So two questions as well. So you mentioned like incentivization and rewards is a big part of a lot of crypto projects. So what do you think is the best, I guess, area or field of discipline to study to get really good at creating strong incentivization programs like game theory or like economics or psychology?
All of those.
All of those? Are
Yeah.
there any other ones?
Which they also all kind of interact well.
Right.
Yeah. So
Are there any other ones aside from those three?
I mean, the only other thing I would say is understanding your market you're selling to. So you're selling to traders, you should probably understand how the finance world works, the terminology they use, what they care about. You're selling to, you know, cypherpunks, right? You have to understand sort of the libertarian, sort of dystopian sort of worldview they hold, and what sort of security, privacy, self-sovereignty, autonomy aspects you're providing them. But those are very like sector specific ones.
And then the second question is, because so many of these projects are based on incentivization, oftentimes like financial incentivization, do you think that could be masking a lot of weak product market fits just because it's going viral because people want the monetary incentives instead of the actual value prop of the project?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. We're in speculative territory. We have been since 2017, earlier than that. So yeah, I mean, people are just taking swings with their bat and hoping it works out. And investors are also taking swings of the bat, hoping it's working out. And no one really knows anything. So yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think regulations will make or break crypto?
I don't think they'll do either. I think regulations are part of the world we live in. And the more important part for crypto isn't to resist regulations, to be part of the creation of the regulations.
Because just because it's made with the idea of decentralization, but then if they regulate the shit out of it, obviously, I feel like a lot of things can happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the argument that we will create such a decentralized world that regulators can't do anything about it. I don't think we're anywhere close to that yet. So I'm not banking on that future at the moment. Yeah, so my alternative is to be in the room, having the conversations, having influence, having, the conversations with the people who actually write the bills and, make those decisions, or having people who are in crypto in those actual seats, writing those bills. But yeah, we can't pull ourselves out of regulations because, well, practically 90% of the money in the world that we care about is regulated in one way or the other. So if we want that money, if we want that sort of market activity, we have to play ball to some extent.
Yeah.
Are you at all worried that crypto's sort of like in the .com bubble type deal right now, or do you think it's not very resemblant to that?
I mean, it is. Am I worried about it is a different question. I don't know if I'm worried about it. I was worried about it in 2017 because I was worried that it would provide a sort of a negative view of the industry and maybe set us back a few years. But yeah, since then, I don't think we're quite at risk of that anymore. It used to be crypto was criminals. It was Silk Road. It was drugs. It was assassinations. It was money laundering. It was terrorists or whatever. So I think we're sort of beyond that at this point. So, a big sort of negative crash, which is probably going to happen, soon-ish. I don't fear crypto is going to go away. It's like here. The question is, how fast will it grow? Will it actually achieve its goals that we're espousing? Not sure yet, but it's definitely here to stay.
If you could go back in time, what's one thing you would do differently in your startup phase? And what is a piece of advice you would give to people in the crowd who are trying to start something of their own?
What he got paid in Bitcoin was pretty good, I don't know if you guys know Olaf Carson Lee, but he's the first employee at Coinbase, and he got his entire salary paid in Bitcoin for all those years he was there. And now he runs Polychain, one of the top 3 VC funds in the world. But more seriously, we were a little dogmatic about how we saw the world, that we thought like the world should operate, with Bitcoin or with crypto money. Like it's important that people have self-sovereign ownership over their assets. And that prevented us from doing things, say like taking credit card payments or debit card payments on the early days of Fold, because we were felt like a little bit like that was selling out. So we were a little dogmatic and not as flexible as we probably should have been, considering sort of the nascent nature of the crypto community back then. There wasn't a lot of money. There was people, we were the redheaded stepchild of Silicon Valley. Basically no one invested in crypto. Like there are very few funds. It was like Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn. It was Boost and YC a little bit, but by the time we applied to YC, they were not into crypto anymore, even though they'd already had Coinbase go through and a couple other projects go through. So yeah, it was really, really, really tough back then.
What are your viewpoints on Ethereum, and do you think it's going to kind of reign dominant into the future, or do you think it will get replaced?
They need to figure out the transaction volume issue. That's the biggest thing. If they can solve that, they probably will win the computational blockchain war, in my view. It's one of those things where, yeah, technology might not be perfect, but it's good enough to do what everyone wants, that improving it by like 10% is not enough to convince tens of billions of dollars and tens of thousands of users to move over. Like that's just not going to happen. So I don't know. They're not there yet. They are taking their sweet time because it's a very hard problem to solve. I don't know. I'm confident. I have friends who are building ETH 2.0, and I have friends doing L2s on Ethereum. So it's definitely the center of the DeFi crypto universe. And none of the other sort of chains that have come out around it for me, feel like they are 10 times better than Ethereum, which is sort of the goal. If you're going to change a paradigm, you need to be 10 times better, or no one's really going to make the effort to switch. Yeah, I mean, like Solana's okay, Near is okay. I don't know enough about Avalanche, but you know, I respect the founder of it. But yeah, if they solve that within the next 2-ish years, they'll probably win.
I'm curious, how do you determine your marketing strategies for your startup, especially making sure that your customers are like well educated? Because like it seems like marketing in the blockchain industry, like it's more geared towards like B2B, so like approaching like enterprise, because that's like will create like more adoption and more scalability as opposed to like B2C, which is like more traditional marketing. So I want to get a sense of like how you guys tackle that part.
So we don't do a lot of B2B marketing, at least in our companies that we have. We have made some like deals with different companies, like for instance, Fold is part of the Visa network. They're the ones who issue the debit card that we use at Fold. I'm not a great B2B sales or marketing person, but like the one thing that I've taken to heart from people who are a lot better at me than it is you really need to know exactly the problem your customer is trying to solve. Like not in the field, not in the ballpark, like you need to know exactly what problem they're trying to solve. If you can deliver that, they're all ears. Outside of that, there's just this sort of discovery period, and because of the slow sales cycles of B2B, it can end up just sort of petering out after a while if you guys don't kind of find a level. So yeah, you gotta know and target and zero in on exactly the problem they're trying to solve.
Also, just following up on that, a lot of like the retail, I guess, B2C side, a lot of people coming into this industry, they're like looking to make a lot of money like overnight, you know, investing like Dogecoin, meme coins. So how would you like differentiate those side of the people as opposed to like people who actually want to, I guess, like are interested in like what exactly you offer?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if it's unfair, but I generally just see whether they know their stuff, whether they know all the little idiosyncrasies of crypto, whether they care about decentralization, whether they care about, you know, what it means to transmit value and unlock that potential. Nothing wrong with someone who's just there to sort of make money and sell or you know, invest. But if I were to ally myself with someone, I'd want them to be able to talk the talk. Because that shows me that they care about the same things I care about. And that's, for me, greater indicator of like partnerships and working well together with people. Like, are they curious about the same things I'm curious about? Are they providing and putting in the same energy that I am to learn about it? And if not, well, we probably don't vibe in the same way.
This is sort of adding on to her point. So I'm building something right now that's sort of targeting people who aren't necessarily familiar with the Web3 world. And because of that, there's an extra like onboarding friction, especially in the sales process. And that also makes finding product market fit way harder when they don't know anything about your product to begin with in the first place. So would you say that it's still worth it trying to achieve that, or should I just switch over and try to target users who are more familiar with the user experience?
I mean, is your core product education? If your core product is education, then you just stick with it. Your core product isn't education, then that is a very high expense you're taking on to educate your potential customers. The same way educating investors is really, really difficult, and for us wasn't worth the time. I would say it's the same thing. Now I have a couple of friends who've started like coding companies and tutorials types of things for like Solidity and whatnot. That's obviously very focused on education. That's their market. But yeah, if your product isn't about educating, I would try to veer away from it. You could do other things like do like inbound marketing, like writing up blogs and other things that people share about like, you know, what my ideas of crypto are and what I think the challenges are, what people should be learning, or my opinion on things like how a wallet should work or whatever. That's great to get attention inbound from people who are, you know, on the outskirts of the industry. But I wouldn't necessarily plow any direct marketing dollars at it if that's not your core audience.
And just like adding on to that, so would you say that the struggle to sort of educate new users is also why so many dApps in industries other than finance don't really take off?
That's definitely a huge component of it. I think the other part is we don't quite know what people are going to pay for yet, and whether the solutions from the blockchain are that much better than the ones in centralized, you know, services. The thing about blockchain is, on the very, very sort of pejorative way of looking at it, it's just a big, really slow database. That's really just what it is. So if you're building a product that is on the blockchain, you're already tied one hand behind your back because you're building a product on a slow database, right? Anything that's any sort of Oracle database from like mid 2000s is better than anything Ethereum or whatnot, you know, does right now. So that's sort of my take on it. I mean, I mean, you're just gonna handicap yourself unless that's like a really core part of what you're doing.
David.
What's your sort of like end vision for like crypto? Like, what do you like? Is it gonna like replace the existing financial infrastructure? Is it gonna be just kind of like a component that's tagged onto it? Like, what's your view on that? And then I have another question that's like unrelated.
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I believe in sort of the fundamentals of crypto, decentralization, self-sovereignty, ownership over stuff like that, and really interested in the idea of transmitting value, like real value across the internet, not through a PayPal or something like that or intermediary. It's like this real value that's respected and can be spent right away. But I don't know how the world's going to evolve. I don't know. I don't have a specific end game other than those values being espoused. It's kind of like how the internet, like, I don't think anyone really had a full picture of how the internet was going to change life now, right? You know, sure, we have like online e-commerce and you can study online. Those are sort of the ideas back in the 70s and 80s, but the way, say, social media has impacted like political discourse in the world, I don't think anyone expected that to happen, right? So I don't know. Yeah, all I want is sort of the values that I care about to be espoused in the products and the code that is run. Outside of that, I don't know.
Yeah, and then my I guess like one follow-up question is like what still needs to be built out in crypto for like you to have like decentralization, right? Because it's like when I look at crypto, I look at like Alchemy and Infura, basically like the two companies that, you know, basically that all of Ethereum runs on, and like that's like centralization. And you kind of look at like everybody uses MetaMask, like again, like that's owned by consensus, like that's centralization. And then even like when you look at DAOs, right, you kind of have like the on-chain voting piece, but then you have like just a group of people with multi-sigs that like control the wallet, and like they can kind of really do whatever they want to. They don't have to like unlock the funds or whatever. And so like that's again centralization. So like what, you know, like do we need to like solve for all of that? And like,
I mean, I think you definitely hit a bunch of really good ones. Yeah, I mean, this has been a problem since the early days of providing either crypto nodes or even miners to people all over the place, or just having them everywhere and anywhere. Like, why isn't the projector just, you know, a node, an Ethereum node, right? Just running, doing whatever, right? It's so decentralized that every little bit and piece of technology has something running in it. That's basically decentralized to the point where you can't take it down, take the network down. So that's definitely a huge component of it. We're not there yet. And I don't think we're gonna get there anytime soon. The hardware required to actually validate and actually, you know, mine the stuff is still pretty complex for any random person to run. So we're not there yet. Yeah, I mean, we need to decentralize things like wallets and ownership and stuff like that. I think a more fundamental thing. One thing is I really want to see is a better way to relate real world assets to the blockchain or digital assets. We don't have a good way of doing it right now. The only way of doing it is someone deposits their real world asset and to a bank like structure, custodian-like structure, and then that person sort of mints tokens or coins based on that. But that's very centralized. Until we have a good way of figuring that connection out, both technologically and sort of socially, like the idea to respect that a real world asset is actually controlled by an online thing, right? Until we figure that out, we're still going to be sort of trapped in this sort of digital world only, and all the sort of assets out there in the world, real estate, contracts, I don't know, relationships with people, stuff like that is just not going to be able to easily fit into the crypto space until we figure that out.
I had one.
Just to be cautious of time,
Yeah.
it is 6 minutes past 7. So can you just answer someone? Can you ask the question in the chat and then we can end it? And then if anyone else has questions, we can, do you have a couple of minutes after?
Sure.
Okay, and you can like stay behind and talk to Corbin, but Jeremy, would you mind reading the chat?
Yeah, it says, could you explain how an ICO works? Is it a way to get funded? So I guess just like very high level, yeah.
Yeah, so ICO is initial coin offering. What happens is essentially we write a contract that mints a bunch of tokens, and we pre-sell them or sell them to folks who say they want to pay X amount of money for the token. And then once they send us the money, we send them back the token, and that's about it. It's really, really simple from like an execution point of view. So yeah, it's a way to raise money. Again, sort of to the earlier point, it's crowdsourcing. So you have the advantages and disadvantages of crowdsourcing. The other disadvantage is that ICOs are technically a sale of security, which means you need to register that security or not do it, or you need to validate that everyone in America who's purchasing it is a accredited investor, which is a hilarious and outdated thing, but exists. So that's the problem with ICOs and why ICOs have sort of fallen out of favor for things like initial exchange offerings, or at this point, just sort of buying equity in a company, or these sort of bear launches, right? Where there isn't any sort of bought ownership from early investors, and the tokens are sort of launched or collected or earned by doing certain actions and whatnot. So that's sort of the high level collaborative, what's the right word? That's the high level sort of idea behind ICOs, those types of things.
Wait, so if you do it through like a DEX, do you have to make sure that people that buy it are accredited?
I mean, the question is, what's your risk profile, right? The question is, how much do you think the SEC is going to come calling and sue you, right? I have friends who that's happened, and for the most part, been slap on the wrist, but a couple of people have had their entire companies shut down because they did that kind of stuff. One of the ones here in town was called Airfox. It's Airfox. Yeah, they had an ICO that basically bankrupted the company once the SEC got involved. There's another one, Saya or Skynet. I don't know if anyone's heard of that company. They also had sort of an early ICO type of thing, but they mostly got a sort of a wrist slap because it wasn't blatantly malicious, and it was only sort of a small part of their overall business. But yeah, it can be troublesome.
So when does it change into actually like me unaccredited being able to buy things on Binance or?
I mean, technically, it's supposed to happen when you either have over $5 million in assets, or you have earned over $200,000 or $300,000 for like 3 consecutive years, or something like that. Which is, because then you're a sophisticated investor, quote unquote. I don't know why that makes you a sophisticated investor, but it does. So that's the gate. That's the gate you have to get through. Yeah.
So I couldn't buy stuff on Binance?
You can. I mean, the question: what's your risk profile? Yeah.
All right.
It's gotta be an 8 on.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to everyone here for coming. And yeah, I think we're wrapping it up now. So if you have more questions, please.
So you can know like what's the best way to reach you, and then also is Upshot like hiring and stuff?
You can reach me via LinkedIn. I think that the link is on the invite for this. You can also just email me at corbin.pon@gmail.com. email. So you can email me. That's probably the easiest ways to contact me. Wait, what was the question?
Is Upshot like hiring?
We are hiring, but we are only hiring like mid-career software engineers right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so how about that?
No worries.
I mean, ideally, we would have a more sort of solid early sort of, early career track for folks, but we're still too small
Yeah.
to figure that out.
Yeah.
Thanks again.